The first sneeze came during breakfast, followed by another, then another. By the time I stumbled into the kitchen, my eyes were already watering and my throat felt like sandpaper. The massive golden retriever sitting by Emma's chair wagged its tail enthusiastically, shedding hair that seemed to float through the morning sunlight like tiny golden daggers aimed directly at my respiratory system. "Maya, meet Buddy," Emma announced cheerfully, scratching behind the dog's ears. "I adopted him yesterday from the shelter. Isn't he gorgeous?" I gripped the doorframe as my chest began to tighten. "Emma, you know I'm allergic, severely allergic." Mom barely looked up from her coffee. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a little pet dander." "A little?" I wheezed, already reaching for my emergency inhaler. "I can't breathe." Dad folded his newspaper with an irritated snap. "Maya, not everything revolves around you. Your sister has been through a difficult time with the breakup." The irony wasn't lost on me. Dr. Robert Chen, respected cardiologist, couldn't recognize respiratory distress in his own daughter. The same man who saved lives daily dismissed my struggle to draw breath as teenage theatrics. Within a week, my world crumbled. The constant exposure to pet dander triggered chronic asthma attacks. I missed 3 days of school, my sinuses perpetually blocked, my skin erupting in angry red hives whenever Buddy brushed against me. Sleep became impossible as I wheezed through the nights, my inhaler constantly within reach. "Just take some Benadryl," Mom suggested dismissively when I begged for relief. "You'll build up a tolerance." My grades plummeted. AP literature essays remained unfinished as I spent hours in the nurse's office. My SAT prep sessions turned into desperate attempts to concentrate through allergy-induced brain fog. Teachers started asking questions. Mrs. Patterson, my guidance counselor, documented every absence, every late assignment, every time I stumbled into class with swollen eyes and labored breathing. The breaking point came during my Harvard interview. After months of preparation, this video call represented everything I'd worked toward. I'd positioned my laptop perfectly, rehearsed my answers, worn my best blazer. Then Buddy wandered into my room, despite my closed door, leaving a trail of invisible allergens in his wake. 20 minutes into the interview, mid-sentence about my passion for molecular biology, my throat began closing. The interviewer watched in horror as I desperately pumped my inhaler, gasping apologies between wheezes. My face swelled before her eyes, hives creeping up my neck like red vines. "I'm so sorry," I managed to croak before ending the call. The rejection email arrived 3 days later. "Unfortunately, we cannot move forward with your application at this time. Harvard, gone." When I confronted my parents, showing them the rejection email, Dad's response cut deeper than any physical pain. "Maybe you should have been better prepared. These things require focus and determination." "I couldn't breathe, Dad. I had an allergic reaction during the interview because of that dog." Emma rolled her eyes from the couch, Buddy's head resting on her lap. "God, Maya, you're so selfish. Buddy is helping me heal from my breakup. Can't you just be happy for me for once?" Mom nodded sympathetically toward Emma. "Your sister needs emotional support right now. Maybe you could try sleeping in the basement until you adjust." The basement. Damp, poorly ventilated, with a persistent mold problem Dad had been meaning to fix for years. That night, as I lay awake wheezing, I finally understood the truth. In my parents' eyes, Emma's temporary heartbreak mattered more than my ability to breathe. Their precious younger daughter's emotional comfort trumped their older daughter's physical survival. I wasn't their child anymore. I was an inconvenience they hoped would simply disappear. Dr. Martinez's voice was clinical but concerned as she reviewed my test results. "Maya's allergic reactions have intensified significantly. The constant exposure is causing systemic inflammation. I'm recommending immediate removal of the pet from the household." Mom shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair beside me. "But doctor, isn't there medication she could take instead?" "Mrs. Chen, your daughter's condition is serious. Without intervention, she could develop chronic respiratory issues or experience anaphylactic shock." The medical terminology hung heavy in the sterile air. Even I understood the gravity. My body was essentially poisoning itself, trying to cope with Buddy's presence. That evening, I waited hopefully as my parents discussed the doctor's report behind their bedroom door. Surely medical evidence from a licensed physician would override Emma's teenage dramatics. I was wrong. "Maya," Dad announced at dinner, his tone suggesting the matter was settled, "we've decided Buddy can stay. Emma's mental health is equally important, and frankly, we think you're being manipulative." "Manipulative?" My fork clattered against my plate. "The doctor said I could die." "Don't be so melodramatic," Mom sighed. "Dr. Martinez was just covering liability. Take more antihistamines. Build up your tolerance gradually." Emma smirked from across the table, Buddy's chin resting on her thigh. "Maya always has to make everything about her. I told you guys, ever since Brad dumped me, Buddy is literally the only thing preventing me from falling into depression. Literally. As if heartbreak equaled respiratory failure." The next betrayal cut deeper. While searching for my inhaler refill receipt in Dad's desk drawer, I discovered bank statements. My college fund, years of birthday money, summer job savings, and parental contributions had been systematically drained. Veterinary bills, professional dog training, premium organic dog food, even a custom doghouse that cost more than my monthly medication. $12,000. Gone. Where's my college money? I confronted them that night. Dad didn't even look guilty. Buddy had unexpected medical expenses, hip dysplasia screening, behavioral training. These things add up. That was my money. "We're your parents," Mom stated firmly. "Family resources go where they're needed most. Emma needed support during her crisis. And I need to breathe." "You're being selfish, Maya," Emma chimed in, fake tears gathering in her eyes. "Buddy saved my life. I was literally suicidal after Brad cheated on me. Literally suicidal. Literally the only thing." Emma wielded that word like a weapon, making her teenage heartbreak sound life-threatening, while my actual medical emergency got dismissed as attention-seeking behavior. The final insult came 3 days later. "We've found a solution," Mom announced brightly. "You can move to the basement. It's more private, and the separation should help your allergies." The basement. Damp concrete walls, a single grimy window, persistent mold smell that made my existing breathing problems worse. They wanted to banish me underground so their precious golden retriever could reign supreme upstairs. Standing in that musty basement, surrounded by Christmas decorations and forgotten exercise equipment, I finally understood. This wasn't about allergies or dogs or Emma's breakup. This was about worth. In my parents' calculation, I simply didn't matter enough. That night in the basement, surrounded by moldy cardboard boxes and the smell of dampness that made my lungs burn, I made a decision. If my parents wanted to treat me like I didn't exist, I'd give them exactly what they wanted. But first, I'd make sure they understood the consequences. I started documenting everything. Every missed school day went into a spreadsheet with timestamps. Every medical bill, every inhaler refill, every emergency room visit, all meticulously recorded. My phone became a weapon, secretly recording conversations that revealed their callous indifference. "Maya's just being dramatic again," Dad's voice captured clearly as he dismissed my breathing difficulties to Mom. "She'll get over it." Maybe if she spent less time complaining and more time adapting, Mom's response, equally damning. The evidence file grew daily. Screenshots of my plummeting grades, photos of the hives covering my arms, video of me using my inhaler 6 times in one morning. I created a timeline showing the direct correlation between Buddy's arrival and my academic collapse. Mrs. Patterson became an inadvertent ally. During our weekly guidance meetings, she documented everything with clinical precision. Maya, your performance has declined dramatically since October. Your teachers are concerned about your college applications. I know, I'm dealing with some health issues at home. She made notes, official notes that would become part of my academic record, showing a previously excellent student's sudden deterioration. Have you discussed this with your parents? They're aware. I kept my voice neutral, letting her draw her own conclusions. Late at night in the basement, I researched parental neglect laws. The legal definitions were clearer than I'd expected. Medical neglect occurred when parents failed to provide necessary medical care. Educational neglect happens when a child's schooling suffered due to parental absence. Financial abuse included misusing a minor's funds. Check, check, and check. I discovered emancipation procedures, legal precedents, and something particularly interesting: cases where parents faced criminal charges for deliberately exposing children to known allergens. Dr. Martinez's medical report became a smoking gun. She'd explicitly warned about anaphylactic shock, yet my parents chose to ignore professional medical advice. The letter began forming in my mind, then on paper. Not a suicide note, something far more devastating. A comprehensive indictment of their parental failures, complete with evidence and legal implications. I wrote draft after draft, perfecting each accusation. The theft of my college fund, the deliberate exposure to life-threatening allergens, the emotional manipulation, the medical neglect. Each paragraph built a case that would destroy their reputation and potentially their careers. But I needed an escape route. Grandmother Chen lived 2 hours away, estranged from Dad since he'd chosen his career over family values. Her words during their last argument 5 years ago. I'd maintained secret contact through social media, sharing updates about school and life. She'd always responded warmly, expressing regret about the family rift. I called her from the school library, using a payphone to avoid detection. Maya? Sweetheart, what's wrong? Her voice broke when I explained everything. The allergies, the basement exile, the stolen college money. By the end, she was crying. Pack your things, I'm calling my lawyer today. Grandma, I need to do this right, strategically. What do you mean? I need them to understand what they've lost. Not just me, but their reputation, their standing, maybe Dad's medical license. She was quiet for a long moment. What do you need from me? Legal backing, documentation, and a place to stay when this explodes. Over the following week, I perfected my plan. The letter would be left on a school day, ensuring maximum panic when they couldn't immediately locate me. I'd already be safely at Grandma's with legal representation. The emancipation paperwork was completed. My evidence file was backed up in multiple locations. Screenshots were sent to trusted friends with instructions to post them publicly if anything happened to me. Everything was ready. The letter sat sealed in my backpack, 30 pages of carefully documented betrayal that would shatter my parents' comfortable world. Tomorrow morning, I would hand them the bill for choosing wrong. I left the letter on the kitchen table at 6:47 a.m., positioned perfectly beside Dad's coffee mug where he couldn't miss it. 30 pages of evidence, medical records, financial documentation, and legal threats sealed in a manila envelope marked the real cost of your choices. By 7:15, I was on the bus to Grandma's house, my phone already buzzing with frantic calls I wouldn't answer. The first call came at 8:23 a.m., then 8:24, 8:26, 8:30. By lunch, I had 47 missed calls and 62 unread text messages. I turned my phone off and let Grandma handle everything through her lawyer. Maya Elizabeth Chen, you call home right now. Dad's voice, captured on voicemail, cracked with panic I'd never heard before. Mom's messages escalated from pleading to threatening. This is ridiculous, Maya. Come home immediately before you make this worse. But I'd already made it worse, much worse. The letter included everything. Bank statements proving they'd stolen my college fund. Audio recordings of their dismissive comments about my medical condition. Dr. Martinez's explicit warnings about anaphylactic shock. Mrs. Patterson's documentation of my declining academic performance. Photos of the moldy basement they'd tried to exile me to. Most devastatingly, I'd included copies of Dad's Hippocratic Oath alongside evidence of his medical neglect of his own daughter. The irony was surgical in its precision. Page 26 contained my masterstroke. I am providing copies of this documentation to the State Medical Board, the Department of Children and Family Services, and the local media. Dr. Robert Chen has violated his medical ethics by denying necessary care to his own daughter. My parents have committed financial abuse by misappropriating my college savings. They have endangered my life through deliberate exposure to known allergens. The threats weren't empty. Grandma's lawyer had already filed the initial paperwork. Emma's breakdown began around noon. Grandma's neighbor reported seeing police cars at our house, responding to Emma's hysterical call about her missing sister. When officers discovered I was safely with family, they asked uncomfortable questions about why a 17-year-old had fled her home. Dad tried calling his hospital connections to contain the damage, but hospital administrators don't ignore potential ethics violations. The medical board launched a preliminary investigation within 24 hours. Dr. Chen, we need to discuss allegations of medical neglect involving a minor in your care. Mom's real estate career faced immediate threats as gossip spread through her professional network. Small-town reputations crumble quickly, and woman who chose dog over daughter's health wasn't exactly a selling point for family homes. By day 3, local media picked up the story. Local doctor accused of medical neglect made the evening news, complete with interviews from my classmates who'd witnessed my declining health. Maya used to be like the smartest girl in school, my lab partner, told reporters. Then suddenly she was always sick, missing classes, couldn't concentrate. We all thought something bad was happening at home. Social media exploded. Maya Chen started trending locally as students shared their own stories of witnessing my struggles. Photos of me using my inhaler in hallways, collapsing in gym class, rushing to the nurse's office, became viral evidence of parental neglect. Emma's friends turned against her as details emerged. The spoiled sister who demanded a dog despite her sister's life-threatening allergies became a social pariah overnight. Her Instagram posts about Buddy saving her life now looked obscenely selfish against the backdrop of my medical crisis. Dad's hospital colleagues began asking pointed questions. Nurses whispered in break rooms. Other doctors wondered how Robert Chen could ignore his own daughter's respiratory distress while treating similar conditions professionally. The missing person report backfired spectacularly when responding officers noted the basement living conditions and documented the allergen-contaminated house. Their report became additional evidence of neglect. Grandma's phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comments. She gave them enough to keep the story alive without revealing our full strategy. My granddaughter is a remarkable young woman who suffered unconscionable treatment from people who should have protected her, she told Channel 7 News. No child should have to choose between breathing and having a family. By Friday, Dad faced temporary suspension pending the ethics investigation. Mom lost 3 major real estate listings as clients questioned her judgment. Emma begged her friends to stop sharing the trending hashtag, but the damage was irreversible. The community that had once respected the Chen family now saw them as cautionary tale about favoritism and medical neglect. From Grandma's living room, I watched my parents' carefully constructed world collapse exactly as planned. The irony was suffocating. I'd finally escaped the allergens that had tormented me for months, only to trigger the worst reaction of my life from Mrs. Henderson's Persian cat next door. It happened during my 3rd week at Grandma's. I'd been helping her elderly neighbor carry groceries when Whiskers brushed against my ankle. Within minutes, my throat began closing with terrifying speed. "Call 911!" Grandma screamed as I collapsed on her kitchen floor, my lips turning blue. The paramedics found me unconscious. My airway nearly sealed shut. Emergency epinephrine barely stabilized me for the ambulance ride. Through my oxygen mask, I heard fragmented radio chatter about anaphylactic shock and critical condition. The hospital became ground zero for the final confrontation I'd never planned. Dad arrived first, still in his surgical scrubs from his reduced duties. His hands shook as he spoke with the emergency physician, the first time I'd seen him vulnerable since this nightmare began. "She's stable, but this was severe. Another few minutes and we would have lost her. Lost her." The words hung in the sterile air like a death sentence he'd helped write. Mom burst through the ICU doors 20 minutes later, mascara streaked, clutching Emma's hand. My sister looked smaller somehow, diminished by weeks of social exile and guilt. "Is she going to be okay?" Mom's voice cracked with genuine terror. For the first time in months, they saw me as their daughter instead of an inconvenience. Too bad it took nearly dying to earn that recognition. The waiting room became an unexpected courtroom. Local news cameras gathered outside, having followed the story to its dramatic climax. Doctor's daughter in critical condition after allergic reaction would be tomorrow's headline. Dad sat with his head in his hands, finally understanding the medical reality he'd dismissed for months. "I almost killed her," he whispered to Mom. "I'm a doctor, and I almost killed my own daughter." Emma's breakdown was spectacular and overdue. She sobbed uncontrollably in the plastic chair, her guilt finally overwhelming her selfishness. "It's my fault," she wailed. "I knew she was sick, but I wanted Buddy so badly. I convinced you guys she was faking. I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so fucking sorry." The profanity shocked Mom into silence. Perfect Emma never swore, never admitted fault, never acknowledged anyone's pain but her own. When I finally regained consciousness 12 hours later, my parents looked like they'd aged years overnight. Dad's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, something I'd never witnessed before. Mom gripped my hand like I might disappear if she let go. "Maya," Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "Can you ever forgive us?" I studied their faces through the medication haze. Real remorse, finally. Terror at how close they'd come to losing me permanently. The kind of panic that only strikes when consequences become irreversible. "I almost died in that house every single day," I said quietly. "You just couldn't see it until it happened somewhere else." The hospital ethics board member arrived that afternoon, clipboard in hand, ready to interview the family about medical neglect allegations. Watching Dad squirm under professional scrutiny while I lay connected to monitors felt like justice served cold. "Dr. Chen, how do you reconcile your treatment of similar cases professionally with your handling of your daughter's condition?" He had no answer. How could he explain ignoring the same symptoms he diagnosed immediately in his patients? Emma made her confession to the room, cameras rolling just outside the door. I manipulated my parents into keeping the dog even though Maya was dying. I lied about being suicidal. I used her college money for vet bills. I convinced them she was being dramatic about a medical condition. Her words would become the soundbite that defined this story. The spoiled sister finally taking accountability for her role in nearly killing her sibling. Mom faced her own reckoning with the Department of Children and Family Services caseworker who'd been monitoring the situation. Mrs. Chen, you received explicit medical advice that your daughter's life was in danger, yet chose to prioritize your younger daughter's emotional comfort. How do you explain this decision? No explanation existed that didn't sound monstrous when spoken aloud. From my hospital bed, connected to machines that proved the severity they didn't, I delivered my final ultimatum. Family therapy, real accountability, public acknowledgement of what you did, or you'll never see me again after I turn 18. The choice was theirs. But this time, the consequences were crystal clear. 6 months later, I graduated valedictorian from Grandma's school district. My acceptance letter to Northwestern, full scholarship based on my essay about medical advocacy, arrived the same day my parents completed their court-mandated parenting classes. The family that had once dismissed my suffering now gathered weekly in Dr. Morrison's therapy office, dissecting their failures under professional supervision. Dad lost 15 pounds and developed premature gray hair during his ethics review. The medical board ultimately suspended his license for 6 months and required additional training on recognizing abuse in medical settings. I violated everything I swore to protect, he admitted during our third family session. I became the kind of doctor I used to report to authorities. Mom's real estate career recovered slowly. She'd rebuilt her reputation by volunteering with families affected by medical neglect, speaking publicly about the warning signs she'd ignored. Her Instagram now featured posts about recognizing childhood allergies instead of staged home photos. I prioritized the wrong child's emotional needs, she told the support group she'd joined. I almost lost Maya forever because I couldn't see past Emma's manipulation. Emma surprised everyone with her transformation. After Buddy was rehomed to her friend Sarah's family, where he thrived without causing medical emergencies, she'd thrown herself into therapy with unexpected dedication. The spoiled princess had evolved into someone capable of genuine remorse and growth. I was so used to getting everything I wanted that I convinced myself Maya's suffering didn't matter, she explained during our first one-on-one conversation in months. I turned your medical condition into competition for attention. She'd started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, reading to kids with chronic illnesses. Small steps toward understanding the gravity of what she'd dismissed as Maya being dramatic. The legal consequences had been substantial but fair. My parents faced no criminal charges after completing family therapy and making financial restitution. They'd repaid my stolen college fund with interest and established a medical expense account for future emergencies. The civil suit settled quietly, with them agreeing to fund my complete education and medical care. Dad's hospital colleagues treated him differently now, cautiously, professionally, but without the easy respect he'd once commanded. Nurses who'd once admired his bedside manner now wondered what kind of man ignored his daughter's respiratory distress. Dr. Chen's case is taught in our ethics seminars now, one of his former residents mentioned during a chance encounter, about how personal bias can override medical judgment. The story had inspired other teenagers to speak up about family medical neglect. My inbox filled with messages from kids whose parents had dismissed their chronic conditions as attention-seeking behavior. Some shared stories far worse than mine. I'd become an accidental advocate, testifying before the state legislature about recognizing medical abuse in family settings. The Maya Chen Act now required mandatory reporting when parents refused medical care for documented conditions. Northwestern accepted my proposal to research allergen exposure in family environments. My thesis advisor called my personal experience invaluable perspective on systemic medical bias. Yet healing remained complicated. Trust rebuilds slowly, if at all. I maintained careful boundaries with my family, supervised visits, therapy sessions, structured interactions that couldn't spiral into the toxic patterns we'd established. "Do you forgive us?" Dad asked during our final session before I left for college. "I forgive you for being human," I answered carefully. "But I'll never forget that you chose wrong when it mattered most." The basement bedroom had been converted into Dad's home office. Mom mentioned this casually, as if erasing the physical space could erase the memory of their willingness to exile me underground. Some wounds heal. Others leave permanent scars that remind you to never again accept less than you deserve. I chose Northwestern. I chose my own path. I chose to survive their choices and thrive despite them. The letter I'd left on their kitchen table had accomplished exactly what I'd intended. It forced them to confront the unthinkable reality of losing me forever. This time, they chose better.